Do you like live television?
I love it. I think it is probably the most terrifying medium in the world. I can't tell you how often when they say 30 seconds to air, I think to myself, oh, what am I doing here?
Picture this. It's a night in 1972. Millions of Americans sit glued to their TVs, expecting just another episode of Bewitched. Instead, they unknowingly witness the show's final moments. No goodbye, no warning, no explanation. Just gone.
I wish I could just, set something on fire or go through the floor, anything. Because it is terrifying. You've got one shot at it, and that's it. And being live, you never know what's going to go wrong. And I must say, it got a little terrifying.
For decades, rumors spread about what really happened. Some insist there was a scandalous scene too bold for 1970s television. Others whisper about a shocking behind-the-scenes incident that forced the network to pull the plug. The truth is even stranger. A tragic accident, a mysterious unacknowledged replacement, an explosive divorce, and a baffling finale shaped one of TV's most puzzling cancellations. America's magical obsession. Before we get to the shocking truth, you need to understand just how massive Bewitched was. On September 17, 1964, American television changed forever. Bewitched premiered on ABC, and overnight, the entire country fell under its spell. This wasn't just another sitcom. This was a cultural phenomenon that would define an entire decade. Elizabeth Montgomery's Samantha Stevens was everything Americans wanted to be. Beautiful, powerful, charming, and able to solve any problem with just a twitch of her nose. That iconic nose twitch became more recognizable than any brand logo. Kids everywhere tried to copy it. Adults wished they could do it for real. Dick York played Darren, the perpetually stressed husband who just wanted a normal life, but married a literal witch. And Agnes Moorehead as Endora? She delivered some of the most savage mother-in-law burns in television history, and America loved her for it. The show was an instant smash hit. By its second season, Bewitched had become ABC's highest-rated series ever. Elizabeth Montgomery was nominated for Emmy after Emmy after Emmy. The show consistently dominated the Nielsen ratings, securing its place in the top 12 year after year. Bewitched wasn't just entertainment. It was appointment television. Families planned their evenings around it. Water usage in cities would drop during episodes because everyone was watching. Advertisers fought for commercial spots because they knew millions of eyeballs would be glued to their screens. The show made Elizabeth Montgomery one of the most recognizable faces in America. She was on magazine covers, in newspapers, on talk shows. She was Samantha Stevens, and Samantha Stevens was the perfect 1960s woman. Powerful, but choosing to be domestic. Magical, but choosing to be ordinary. Independent, but devoted to her husband. Beneath the light-hearted comedy, though, Bewitched was saying something deeper. The witch-mortal marriage wasn't just a funny premise. It was a metaphor for any relationship dealing with differences. Religion, culture, race, class. The show tackled prejudice in a way that slipped past network censors because it was wrapped in supernatural comedy. For 8 seasons, Bewitched ruled the airwaves. It seemed unstoppable. But as any fan of the show knows, the most powerful spells always have a price. The accident that changed everything. Here's where our story takes its first dark turn. And trust me, this is where things get really twisted. Dick York, the original Darren Stevens, was hiding a terrible secret from America. Behind that charming smile and exasperated expressions was a man in constant, excruciating pain. Years before Bewitched even existed, York was working on a Gary Cooper Western called They Came to Cordura. in 1959, and one freak accident on that set would completely destroy his life. Imagine this. It's the last scene of the entire production. Everyone's exhausted, but excited to finally wrap. York and Cooper are filming a sequence where they're operating a hand car, one of those old railroad mechanisms you pump up and down to move along the tracks. They're transporting wounded soldiers down an abandoned rail line. York is at the bottom of his stroke, operating the teeter-totter-like mechanism that powers the handcar. As they pass the camera, the director shouts, "Cut!" Finally done, right? Wrong! In that split second, one of the actors playing a wounded soldier reaches up and grabs the very handle York is lifting. York had been expecting to lift maybe 20 or 30 pounds. Instead, he's suddenly hoisting the full body weight of a grown man, around 180 pounds, in one violent, jarring motion. The damage was catastrophic and immediate. York later recalled how the muscles on the right side of his back just gave way completely. They tore apart and released. In his words, that single moment triggered everything that followed. Years of chronic agony, dependence on pain medication, struggling with addiction, and ultimately, a career cut tragically short. One careless grab by another actor, one fraction of a second, and Dick York's entire future was obliterated. Watch early episodes of Bewitched, then watch later ones. Notice anything different? York is lying down more, sitting a lot more, absent from scenes even more. The writers had to get creative, constantly inventing reasons why Darren was on the couch, in bed, or conveniently away on business trips. But even these accommodations couldn't save him from what was coming. In January 1969, they're filming an episode called Daddy Does His Thing. York showed up to work that day already feeling terrible. He was feverish, weak, and in more pain than usual. But the show must go on, right? During a scene involving special effects work on scaffolding, the unthinkable happened. Dick York collapsed. Not just stumbled, not just fell, collapsed. Completely. He had a seizure where he bit his own tongue. His body had finally reached its breaking point. The pain, the medication, the years of pushing through had all caught up to him in one horrifying moment. He was rushed to the hospital immediately. When director William Asher visited York, he already knew what had to happen. He asked York directly if he wanted to leave the series. York's response was simple. "If it's all right with you, Billy." Just like that, one of television's most beloved characters lost the man who had defined him for 5 seasons. Dick York's time as Darren Stevens was over. But here's the thing that makes this story even more tragic. York's departure wasn't just the end of his time on Bewitched. It was effectively the end of his career. His health never recovered enough for him to work regularly again. The role that had made him a household name became the role that broke him. And the show? The show was about to make a decision that would shock audiences and start Bewitched's slow descent into cancellation. The replacement nobody talked about. What happened next is one of the strangest decisions in television history, and it's a big part of why Bewitched eventually failed. The producers faced an impossible situation. Your male lead has just collapsed and left the show. You can't continue without a Darren Stevens, so what do? You bring in another Dick, and you pretend nothing happened. Dick Sargent was cast as the new Darren Stevens starting in Season 6. Interestingly, he had actually been the first choice to play Darren when Bewitched was being developed back in 1964, but he'd been under contract elsewhere. Now, 5 years later, he was finally getting his shot. But here's the absolutely insane part. The show never acknowledged the change. Think about that for a second. One of the 2 main characters in your show suddenly looks completely different. Sounds completely different. Acts completely different. And everyone on the show just pretends this is totally normal. There was no magical explanation. No spell gone wrong that transformed Darren's appearance. No winking acknowledgement to the audience. No special episode explaining what happened. One week, Dick York was Darren Stevens. The next week, Dick Sargent was Darren Stevens. And everyone just acted like this was fine. The audience was not having it. Fans were confused, then angry, then heartbroken. This was their Darren. Dick York had made the character real for 5 years. He had chemistry with Elizabeth Montgomery. He had perfected that exasperated, "What has Samantha done now?" expression. And now some other guy was playing him, and nobody on the show was even going to mention it? The ratings told the story. Bewitched, which had been safely in the top 11, plummeted to 24th place. Millions of fans simply stopped watching. To them, the show had betrayed their trust. Dick York was Darren Stevens, and no replacement could fill those shoes. But the behind-the-scenes drama? That was even worse than the ratings drop. Agnes Moorehead, who had been extremely close to Dick York, was furious about the change. She felt York had been thrown away, discarded because his body had given out, and she was not going to welcome Dick Sargent with open arms. The battles between Moorehead and Sargent on set became legendary. Cast and crew members later described confrontations so intense that they reduced Sargent to tears on multiple occasions. Moorehead, known for her sharp tongue as Endora, turned that weapon on her new co-star with devastating effect. Ironically, this drew Dick Sargent closer to Elizabeth Montgomery. United by the toxic atmosphere on set, they formed a friendship that would last until Sargent's death decades later. But personal friendships couldn't save a show that was hemorrhaging viewers and creative energy. The writing had become lazy. Many episodes in the Sargent years were barely disguised remakes of earlier episodes. Same plots, slightly different jokes, recycled scenarios. The writers had run out of ideas, and it showed. Bewitched was dying, and it seemed like everyone could feel it. But wait, there's more drama to unpack, and this one hits close to home for our leading lady, the marriage that fell apart. But wait, there's more drama to unpack, and this one hits close to home for our leading lady. Remember how I said Elizabeth Montgomery was the heart and soul of Bewitched? Well, there's a reason she looked so comfortable on set. Her husband, William Asher, was the show's director and producer. Together, they had created Bewitched through their production company, Ashmont Productions. Their names were literally in the company name. Ashmont, Asher Montgomery. Their personal and professional lives were completely intertwined. Sounds perfect, right? A power couple creating television magic together? Wrong. By the late 1960s, cracks were appearing in the fairy tale. And by the early 1970s, the marriage was crumbling faster than a sandcastle at high tide. Rumors of affairs on both sides swirled around the set. Montgomery was reportedly involved with Richard Michael. Asher had his own indiscretions. The couple who had seemed so perfect, who had 3 children together, who had built a television empire together, were falling apart. And they still had to work together. Every single day. Imagine you're Elizabeth Montgomery. You're playing a character in a perfect, loving marriage. You're delivering lines about how much you adore your husband. You're filming romantic scenes with Dick Sargent, while your real husband directs you from behind the camera. Your real marriage is a disaster, but you have to pretend on screen that everything is magical and wonderful. The strain was unbearable. Montgomery had already tried to leave Bewitched after season 5. She was exhausted with the role, tired of being typecast, and desperate for more challenging work. She was a talented dramatic actress, but America only wanted to see her as Samantha Stevens, the perfect witch housewife. ABC had offered her a fortune to stay, and financial considerations had kept her trapped. But now, entering Season 8 with her marriage imploding and her resentment growing, Montgomery was reaching her breaking point. She was also frustrated creatively. Despite 8 Emmy nominations for playing Samantha, she had never won. The role that had made her famous had also become a prison. Hollywood wouldn't take her seriously as a dramatic actress because they couldn't see past the nose twitch. The personal and professional were colliding in the most painful way possible. Coming to work meant facing her estranged husband. Playing a happy housewife meant living a lie. And continuing the show meant sacrificing her dreams of breaking free from typecasting. Something had to give. The decision that killed the show. By the time Bewitched began filming its 8th season in 1971, Elizabeth Montgomery had made up her mind. She was done. The show had become a burden instead of a joy. The creative well had run dry. Episodes were repetitive and uninspired. The magic that had made Bewitched special in 1964 felt tired and dated in 1972. And Montgomery was exhausted in every possible way. Physically, emotionally, creatively. But ABC wasn't ready to give up their golden goose. Despite declining ratings, the network still believed Bewitched had life left in it. The show had a contract for 2 more seasons, and ABC was prepared to honor it. They offered Montgomery another enormous sum of money to continue for a 9th season. We're talking about life-changing money. The kind of offer most actors couldn't refuse. Elizabeth Montgomery refused it. She chose her freedom over financial security. She chose her mental health over her bank account. She chose her future over her past. It was a bold, risky decision that would effectively end Bewitched. Because without Montgomery, there was no show. You could replace Darren Stevens, as traumatic as that had been. But you couldn't replace Samantha. She was the show. Elizabeth Montgomery was Bewitched. Here's the truly bizarre part. Montgomery made this decision, but she didn't tell everyone immediately. The writers, producers, and most of the cast continued planning for Season 9 as if everything was normal. They were scripting episodes, discussing storylines, making plans for the future. They had no idea the show was already dead. So when they filmed what would become the final episode, nobody realized they were filming the final episode. There was no sense of occasion, no emotional goodbye, no special treatment. It was just another day at work. The episode that aired as the series finale was called "The Truth, Nothing But the Truth, So Help Me Sam." In it, Endora gives Darren a pin that forces him to tell the absolute truth. Hijinks ensue. Darren's brutal honesty nearly costs him a client, but ultimately, his truthfulness wins everyone over. The episode ends with Samantha and Darren sharing a sweet moment, reaffirming their love. It seems like a nice ending, right? Sweet, romantic, full of love? Except nobody knew it was the ending. When the episode aired on July 1st, 1972, there were no special promos, no series finale announcement, no farewell message from the cast. It was just another episode of Bewitched, scheduled like any other. Audiences watching at home had no idea they were witnessing the end of an era. They expected to see Samantha and Darren again next season. They thought they'd get more magical mishaps, more Endora insults, more nose twitches. Instead, the show just disappeared. Making matters even worse, the final episode wasn't even original. It was a remake of a Season 2 episode from 1965 called Speak the Truth. After 7 years, the writers apparently hoped audiences had forgotten the earlier episode and wouldn't notice they were watching recycled content. So Bewitched ended with a remake. No closure, no goodbye. Just a recycled plot. And then silence. Can you imagine? 8 years, 254 episodes, millions of devoted fans, and the show just vanished, without explanation. The shocking truth revealed. All right, so here's the moment you've been waiting for. The infamous scene. The moment that supposedly destroyed Bewitched. The scandal that ABC desperately tried to hide from the public. See, people love simple explanations. They want to believe that one shocking scene brought down a television empire. It's clean. It's dramatic. It's the kind of story that gets repeated at parties. But reality? Reality is messier. And if you ask me, way more fascinating. What actually killed Bewitched wasn't a scandal. It was a slow-motion train wreck that nobody saw coming. It was a perfect storm of disasters, betrayals, and bad decisions that built up over years, until the whole thing just collapsed. Bewitched ended because its star wanted it to end. Elizabeth Montgomery's refusal to continue, despite massive financial incentives, was the death blow. Without her, ABC had no choice but to cancel the series. But Montgomery's decision didn't happen in a vacuum. It was the result of a perfect storm of problems that had been building for years. Dick York's tragic collapse and departure dealt a blow the show never recovered from. When Dick Sargent replaced him, millions of fans tuned out. The ratings drop in Season 6 was significant, and the show never climbed back to its former glory. The show's creative bankruptcy was obvious to everyone. Writers were recycling old plots, sometimes barely changing anything. The formula that had seemed fresh and innovative in 1964 felt stale and predictable by 1972. How many times can you watch Endora turn Darren into an animal? How many times can Samantha accidentally reveal her powers to nosy neighbors? The behind-the-scenes atmosphere had become toxic. Agnes Moorehead's battles with Dick Sargent created constant tension. Elizabeth Montgomery's crumbling marriage to William Asher made every day on set uncomfortable. The joy and chemistry that had made the early seasons magical had been replaced by professional obligation and personal resentment. American television was also changing. By the early 1970s, audiences wanted more relevant, socially conscious programming. Shows like All in the Family and MASH were tackling controversial topics and pushing boundaries. Bewitched, with its light-hearted suburban fantasy, felt increasingly out of touch. Even the production had issues. In 1970, a fire destroyed the set of the Stevens' home, requiring a complete rebuild. This disruption, combined with everything else, felt like a sign that the show's time was up. What happened to the cast? The aftermath of Bewitched's cancellation affected everyone involved, and for some, the consequences were devastating. Let's start with Dick York, because his story is the most heartbreaking. After leaving Bewitched, York's health continued to deteriorate. The chronic pain that had forced him off the show never improved. He struggled to find regular work because his physical limitations made him unreliable for productions. The man who had been one of television's most recognizable faces fell on hard times, struggling both physically and financially. York and his family faced genuine poverty in his later years. He did occasional voice work when his health permitted, But steady employment was impossible. In interviews before his death, York spoke fondly of his time on Bewitched, and particularly of Elizabeth Montgomery, but there was always a sadness in his words. You could tell he knew that the role that had made him famous had also broken him. Dick York died in 1992 at age 63, his body finally giving out after decades of pain. Dick Sargent, who had been unfairly blamed by many fans for the show's decline, continued working steadily after Bewitched ended. He appeared in numerous TV shows and movies throughout the 1970s and 80s. But in 1991, he made a different kind of headline. He publicly came out as gay, becoming one of the first major television stars to do so. Sargent became an active LGBTQ+ rights advocate in his final years. He and Elizabeth Montgomery, who had remained close friends, marched together as Grand Marshals at the Los Angeles Gay Pride Parade in 1992. It was a powerful moment that showed how their friendship had transcended the troubled production that brought them together. Dick Sargent died of prostate cancer in 1994 at age 64. Agnes Moorehead, the scene-stealing Endora, returned to serious dramatic work after Bewitched ended. She had always been a critically acclaimed actress who took the Bewitched role primarily for the steady paycheck. But she didn't have long to enjoy her freedom from the show. Producer-director William Asher continued his successful career in television, directing episodes of numerous popular series. His marriage to Elizabeth Montgomery officially ended in divorce in 1974. The production company they had built together, Ashmont Productions, dissolved along with their marriage. Asher passed away in 2012 at age 90. And Elizabeth Montgomery? She finally got what she wanted: freedom from typecasting and the opportunity to showcase her dramatic range. Montgomery became extremely selective about her work after Bewitched. She deliberately avoided long-running series and focused instead on TV movies, where she could take on challenging roles. She delivered powerful performances in A Case of Sexual Abuse in 1974 and The Legend of Lizzie Borden in 1975, where she played the infamous accused killer. Both performances earned her Emmy nominations, proving she had the dramatic chops she'd always claimed. Critics praised her range and depth, finally seeing her as more than just a nose-twitching witch. But here's the irony. Despite leaving Bewitched voluntarily and fighting so hard to escape its shadow, Montgomery retained a 20% ownership stake in the series. She continued earning royalties from syndication for the rest of her life. The show she'd been desperate to escape kept providing for her financially until her death from cancer in 1995 at age 62. Even after death, she remained forever linked to Samantha Stevens in the public consciousness. The legacy that wouldn't die. Here's the truly wild part of this story. Despite its confusing, anticlimactic ending, Bewitched refused to die. In syndication, the show found new life and new audiences. Reruns aired constantly throughout the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, introducing generation after generation to Samantha's magical world. Kids who hadn't even been born when the show originally aired grew up watching it every afternoon after school. The show's lighthearted charm proved timeless. While television evolved and changed around it, Bewitched remained comfort food entertainment that never went out of style. In 2002, TV Guide ranked Bewitched number 50 on its list of the 50 greatest TV shows of all time. A single episode, Divided He Falls, from Season 2, was ranked number 48 on TV Guide's list of the 100 greatest episodes of all time in 1997. These honors came decades after cancellation. In 2005, Hollywood tried to recapture the magic with a big-budget film adaptation starring Nicole Kidman and Will Ferrell. The movie took a meta approach, with Kidman playing an actual witch cast as Samantha in a TV reboot. While the film received mixed reviews and failed at the box office, its very existence proved the enduring power of the Bewitched brand. That same year, a bronze statue of Elizabeth Montgomery as Samantha Stevens was erected in Salem, Massachusetts. The statue's unveiling featured appearances by surviving cast members and remains a popular tourist attraction. Fans still make pilgrimages to take photos with it, more than 50 years after the show premiered, proving the show's cultural impact extended far beyond its original run. Bewitched directly inspired other shows, most notably NBC's I Dream of Jeannie, which premiered just 1 year after Bewitched. The premise was remarkably similar: supernatural woman, mortal man, magical mishaps. While I Dream of Jeannie had its own identity, it's clear that Bewitched paved the way. In 2005, Hollywood tried to recapture the magic with a big-budget film adaptation starring Nicole Kidman and Will Ferrell. The movie took a meta approach, with Kidman playing an actual witch cast as Samantha in a TV reboot. While the film received mixed reviews and failed at the box office, its very existence proved the enduring power of the Bewitched brand. That same year, a bronze statue of Elizabeth Montgomery as Samantha Stevens was erected in Salem, Massachusetts. The statue's unveiling featured appearances by surviving cast members and remains a popular tourist attraction. Fans still make pilgrimages to take photos with it, more than 50 years after the show premiered. In 1977, ABC attempted a spin-off series called Tabitha, following a grown-up Tabitha Stevens working in television while balancing her career and magical abilities. The show lasted only 1 season, proving that lightning doesn't strike twice. But perhaps Bewitched's most important legacy is cultural. The show tackled serious themes beneath its supernatural comedy. The witch-mortal marriage was clearly a metaphor for any relationship dealing with differences, whether religious, cultural, or racial. One episode, Sisters at Heart, which aired on Christmas Eve 1970, directly addressed racism. It was co-written by students from Jefferson High School in Los Angeles and featured a spell that made a bigoted character see everyone as black. Elizabeth Montgomery introduced the episode by speaking directly to camera about tolerance and unity. For its time, this was groundbreaking. Bewitched used magic as a Trojan horse to sneak progressive messages past network censors and into American living rooms. And Samantha herself? She was, in many ways, a feminist character before mainstream feminism took hold. She was powerful, capable, and often smarter than her husband. She chose to suppress her powers not because she was weak, but because she loved Darren. When she did use magic, it was to solve problems and help people, displaying agency and independence. So let's bring this all together. The infamous scene that took Bewitched off the air? It's a myth, a story that's more interesting than the reality, which is why it persists. The real story is messier, sadder, and more human than any single scandalous moment. It's a story about a talented actress trapped by her most famous role, desperate for freedom, even if it meant walking away from fortune. An actor whose body gave out under the strain of chronic pain, ending both his time on the show and his career. A replacement who was never accepted by fans or his co-star, blamed for a decline he didn't cause. A marriage that crumbled under the pressure of working together while falling apart personally. Writers who ran out of creative energy and started recycling old stories. And a show that simply faded away without the goodbye it deserved. Elizabeth Montgomery's decision to leave was the final nail in the coffin, but the coffin had been under construction for years. Dick York's departure, creative bankruptcy, behind-the-scenes toxicity, and changing television tastes all contributed to Bewitched's demise. The confusing finale that left fans without closure. That wasn't the cause of cancellation. It was a symptom of a show that had run out of magic and didn't even realize it was dying until it was too late. But you know what? Despite the messy ending, despite the drama and disappointment, Bewitched's legacy endures. The show may have ended without the farewell it deserved, but its place in television history is absolutely secure. Sometimes the stories behind our favorite shows are complicated, messy, and far less magical than what we see on screen. But that doesn't diminish the joy they brought us. Bewitched may not have had an infamous scene that took it off the air, but it had something better. 8 seasons of magic, laughter, and escapist fun that continues to enchant new generations. And maybe that is the most powerful spell of all. If this video blew your mind, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe for more shocking stories from television history. I've got videos exposing the real reasons behind other classic TV cancellations that will absolutely shock you. What's your favorite Bewitched episode? Team Dick York or Team Dick Sargent? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.